And I received another call right after October 7th from Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League. For over a century, the ADL has been the world's leading anti-hate organization with a distinguished record of fighting anti-Semitism and advocating for just and fair treatment for all. Jonathan joined the ADL in 2015 after serving in the White House as Special Assistant to President Obama. Under Jonathan's leadership, the ADL has modernized its operations, innovated its approaches to counter anti-Semitism from all sides, and enhanced its efforts to combat extremism in all forms. And in this last year especially, Jonathan's voice has been for us a beacon of moral clarity. His first book was published in 2022. It Could Happen Here: Why America is Tipping from Hate to the Unthinkable and How We Can Stop It, is a primer on how we as individuals, as organizations, and as a society can strike back against anti-Semitism and all hate. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan Greenblatt.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Rabbi Davidson, for welcoming me here to Temple Emanu-El, this beautiful sanctuary on this incredibly special night. Cardinal Dolan, Pastor Stoller, thank you for joining us this evening. I always remember some teacher or rabbi somewhere saying to me how different we Jews celebrate our New Year. Sure, we make a lot of noise. The shofar is still ringing in my ears from this afternoon. But the similarities between the Jewish New Year and the drinking and dancing and celebrating that happens everywhere, December 31st, they end there. For us, this is a very solemn time, a time for reflection and introspection, a time when we look back on what we have done these past 365 days and look ahead to the year to come. A moment to look not out, but into ourselves, and ask, are we becoming the parent or sibling or child or spouse or grandparent or colleague or friend or neighbor that we want to become? Last year, at this time, when we were starting year 5784, we truly, profoundly, had no idea that the year ahead would be a year filled with terror, death, and destruction. That this year would be one of the deadliest, most terrifying, most precarious in the long history of the Jewish people. Little did we know a year ago when we read Unatana Tokef that it would manifest in reality just days later. Little did we know how our world would be turned upside down. Little did we know how we would be tested. Like perhaps many of you, I've been to Israel since the attacks of 10/7. I've seen destroyed homes, bullet holes pockmarking the walls, dried blood on the floors. I went to the site of the Nova Festival and walked the grounds where young people had been hunted down and slaughtered like livestock. I saw the spaces where adolescents hid before they were attacked, butchered, and some kidnapped and brought into Gaza. I've been to Hostage Square and held hands with families who lost everything and hugged those still waiting for their loved ones to come home. These past months, this past year, the Jewish people have cried at far too many funerals. The attacks by Hamas and the subsequent attacks by Hezbollah also sparked a fire, not just over there, but right here in the US, right here in New York City, right here in Midtown Manhattan. At ADL, we saw it almost immediately. We saw it online. We saw it in the streets. We saw it on our campuses. Think about this. In 2022, ADL tracked a record number of anti-Semitic incidents in America. In 2022, we hit an all-time high. That was then shattered in 2023. In 2022, in that record-breaking year, we recorded 0 assaults on college campuses. Last year, 28. This year, 1 month in, half a dozen and counting. I could go on and on and on with statistic after statistic. I could tell you story after story after story that our 25 regional offices have heard about Jewish people being harassed, about Jewish children being bullied, Jewish-owned businesses boycotted, Jewish institutions vandalized, Jewish professionals shunned by their peers. In many places that I visit, and I travel all the time, I could share these anecdotes. Each one is more chilling than the next. But here's the thing. I don't have to do that here tonight, because every single one of you has a story to tell. I can say, as I stand here, with absolute certainty, that might surprise our non-Jewish friends who are here with us tonight, that every single Jewish person, every one of you sitting here in the pews, has either been directly touched, whether it happened to you, or knows someone who was impacted because it happened to them, or their children, or their loved ones, or to someone you knew in your congregation, someone you know in your community. Literally, we all know someone. As we all know, the Jewish people, we've borne the brunt and have the scars to show for a great deal of trauma after nearly 2 millennia in diaspora. But in these modern times, in the post-48 world in which we live, not just here in America, by the way, but around the world, we are feeling something today that we just never felt before. And again, I know I haven't spoken to most of you, but I know as I look you in the eyes standing up here, you know what I'm talking about. We feel it here on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Who would have thought in the city with the largest Jewish population in the world, but this feeling, this anxiety, it's not particular to the Upper East Side, because I hear it again from Jewish people all over the world. They're feeling it in London and they're feeling it in Los Angeles. They're feeling it in Buenos Aires and they're feeling it in Brazil. They're feeling it in Copenhagen and they're feeling it in Cape Town. They're feeling it in Melbourne and they're feeling it in Montreal. So what are they feeling? This grim sense that the history we thought we had outrun here in America or in Australia or in Europe, the fate that we believed we had outfoxed, that haunted our ancestors, it looms at our door. And there are so many signs. There are so many signs. Things that we took for granted now feel far less certain. The idea that universities like Columbia, Penn, and Harvard, that we helped to build, we thought they would be welcoming of our sons and our daughters. That those who share our commitment for the dignity of all people, those who speak out against hatred, who demonstrate against violence against women, would surely do the same when it came to our dignity, when it came to anti-Semitism, when it came to violence against our women. But maybe not. You know, in thinking about this earlier today at Shul, my eyes turned to the Torah reading for the second day of Rosh Hashanah, a part of the book of Genesis that tells us about the binding of Isaac, one of the seminal moments in the history of the Jewish people. I might argue one of the seminal moments in the history of humanity. As you all likely recall, Abraham and Sarah longed for a child of their own for many, many years. Finally, in their old age, a miracle happens, and they have a son, Isaac. And the Torah tells us that after a while, God decided to test Abraham and his faith. God called to him, and Abraham, our patriarch, responded, Hineni, here I am. And what follows was the supreme test of Abraham's faith, when he sacrificed his beloved son Isaac for God. And in the weeks to come, in the Torah, as we will read, we will see how our forefathers, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, they too were called by God at key moments, and they responded with the same words that Abraham used. The simple phrase, Hineni, here I am. Here I am. It's a powerful idea, one that resonates throughout the ages. Indeed, a famous Jewish thinker who's right down the block from here, he's known to have said 80% of life is just showing up. Maybe not 80%, but you get the idea. Here I am. And over the past year, so many of you have answered the call with your own hineni, raising and giving money to support our brothers and sisters, our cousins and our co-religionists in Israel, telling your alma maters that you will not stand for silence in the face of Jew hatred, going into the streets to demand that our hostages be freed. And in what I think is one of the most remarkable developments of this past year, so many of you have organized yourselves into a new grassroots movement, a Jewish grassroots, the likes of which we had never seen. I witness it in the parents coming together on Facebook, the alumni organizing through WhatsApp, doing whatever you can to support your colleges, our community. Kol hakavod to all of you for doing your part. And I have no doubt in this new year, you too will be asked again. We don't know where this ark will land that feels upon us right now in the Middle East, that's reemerging on our campuses. I have no doubt that all of us will be asked again, called to service. And I know how you will answer. Hineni, here I am. But Hineni is not just an expectation for ourselves. It is also an expectation that we have friends, fellow citizens, that we have neighbors who we can count on when it counts. That's why I'm so appreciative. That's why we should all be so grateful, so moved by the presence of Cardinal Dolan and Pastor Stoller today. Pastor Stoller told us what it meant to be present. He was telling us, Hineni, here I am. And their presence on the bima is a powerful reminder that there are allies across American society. They might not know, again, a word of Hebrew, but when Pastor Stoller said, we need to be present, he was evoking our patriarch Abraham, our shared patriarch. They have been with us, their Jewish neighbors, to offer a shoulder, a helping hand, and their unvarnished voices against that tidal wave of hate that seems to be washing upon our society. Sometimes we call these people righteous Gentiles. I would just call them authentic friends. So thank you, Your Eminence and Your Reverend, for joining us tonight. Thank you for standing with us over the past year. Not just because your leadership is extraordinary, but it is. It means so much because your presence is accentuated by the absence over this past year of so many who we thought were allies. And that absence, I think I can look across this room and I know that each of you knows what I'm talking about. The institutions that seemingly take a stand on all the great issues of the day, but in the days after 10/7 were silent. Or if they weren't, they couldn't just bring themselves to unequivocally condemn the slaughter of Jewish men and women and children. The businesses and corporations that so often lend their name in the fight against injustice and would never dream of hiring an avowed racist, nonetheless seem to have no problem with employees calling for the destruction of the Jewish people. The organizations that see themselves as part of a larger movement for the rights and protection of all minorities. Organizations that, again, we helped to build, that we have unquestionably supported, marching, organizing, speaking out on their behalf. And yet they were nowhere to be found when the minority being attacked was us. And even worse, some of them have even gone on the offensive, saying that they cannot partner or have members who are, quote, Zionists. Look, you don't need a PhD in Middle East history or to work at the ADL to recognize that the refusal to work with Zionists is just a more trendy way of saying no Jews allowed. And look, whether it's animus or cowardice, ignorance or malice, whatever it is that motivates them, the effect is the same. While many of these groups speak about allyship, seems to me that they don't really know how it works. There is nothing brave about running to the spot where everybody else is going. That's not allyship. There is nothing courageous in following the crowd. Again, not allyship. It's not being an ally. It's jumping on the bandwagon when you simply do what everyone else does. You see, because allyship doesn't matter when it's easy. What matters is to take a stand when it's hard. What matters is to call out anti-Semitism when you see it among your friends, not your enemies. What matters is to call out anti-Jewish bigotry or any form of bigotry when it happens in public, not to rail against it in private. What matters is to stand up to hate when it might have a cost, not when it has no consequences. What matters is to take a risk to do what's right. And that is our challenge as we begin this new year. To fight for our brothers and sisters on the front lines in Israel. To never stop shouting for the release of our hostages. To demonstrate compassion for innocents, irrespective of their ethnicity or their faith or their nationality. To never allow the other side to rob us of our humanity. To speak out against anti-Semitism wherever and whoever the source, friend or foe alike. And when we are tested, and when we are called, to remember to answer with the same clarity as our forefathers. Hineni, here I am. May all of you and the Jewish people everywhere have a happy and healthy, safe and sweet new year and be inscribed in the book of life. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.